hypothetically, if we went back on the road full time, could you drive this truck as your daily? Welcome back to JB Reviews. I have my 2024 Chevy Silverado 3500 dually, and most of you guys know I ran 37, so there's not a lot of trucks out there with the stock wheels. They did upgrade these to an 18-inch, and so I think it looks perfect with a larger tire versus going to an aftermarket wheel, because typically people go 20-inch, but the 18s on 37s look really good. So I do have a cognito level up front, and it's at about 2 1/4 inches. So with the independent front suspension, you don't have to necessarily go to full 3 inches. There is no spacer on the front either. I know a couple people asked me that question in my email, and no, I did not run a spacer on the front. Out back, I did run 2 spacers on each side because you need to space out the duals because the offset on the wheels doesn't give you enough clearance. I also ran a spacer all the way in where the hub is, so I can kind of keep it from hitting the leaf springs. So you do get kind of close, and you may not need to run a spacer, but if you do tow a trailer, that's where you might run into some issues. But I feel like the truck came out perfectly. I painted the bumpers, I blacked out pretty much the door handles, the front grille, all that good stuff. And yeah, the wheels just really came out perfect. So I have my wife with me today. I'm gonna let her drive the truck only because I drive these trucks all the time. However, she drives a nice cushy little Wagoneer, so I think that she would be a good tester for the ride comfort on this truck. Now, let me show you guys where I have the tire pressure at. Most of you guys have noticed, you see right here? Actually, no, that's just a shade. But the tires are riding on the centers, so I'm gonna have to air these things way down. So if I have a chance in this video, maybe I'll get home and show you guys how to air down tires on a dually, because I don't really know how to actually. Like, I do not know how to get back in the rear of this tire because my hand will not fit between these holes. So we're gonna have to figure that out together. Hey, what's going on? Are you gonna drive us today? All right, let's go. Now, first thing I will say, this truck does sit a little bit taller with the 37s and the level, so having the high clearance steps, I actually don't mind them. Do you like the steps on the truck?
I love the way they look. They are a little high, but I prefer this to the ones that fold in and out.
Really?
I just feel like that's one more thing that could break. This is always out all the time.
I get that. I mean, the motors on those powered pull running boards, I mean, they're pretty easy to replace.
Okay.
They're basically the same motors that they use on slide outs on RVs I saw on the Rams. I haven't looked at the ones on my white truck though. But let's go ahead and start it up. It's 100 degrees outside right now. Let's see where the tire pressure is. Tire pressure up front, 62, 64, and then 60 PSI all out back. I'm probably gonna air everything down to about 45 PSI. That way the tires are riding evenly on the tarmac. So let's go ahead and get down the road and let's see what my wife thinks about the ride in the truck. Woo! You whipping this thing, aren't you? Gee whiz! Look at that! Wow! So, one thing I will say, and I don't know if you would know this, I did notice that braking distance has increased. Like, you really have to push the brakes in with these 37s, like quite a bit, I would say, versus the stock tires. And that's because you're spinning a lot more weight all the way around, and there's 6 tires. So having the 37s, you do notice the brakes are being used a lot more. So far, what are your thoughts?
I don't have any yet.
Fair enough, you just kind of pulled out not long ago.
That's what she said.
Wow, you are on it today. But yeah, on that note, I do notice that the performance of the truck, I don't know if it changed any. Like, I can't tell. I have towed the 5th wheel. I didn't go far. I only went down the street and back because I had to move it. But unloaded, I feel like the truck does perform about the same. It is a little rougher. Would you say? Do you notice that a little bit?
A little bit.
Okay.
But it's not terrible. How tall were the tires on the Ram 35 that we
Those
had?
are 35. They were like 35.6, I believe, because they were 295, 65, 20.
Okay.
That truck rode rougher than this, I would say.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. So
it did.
even though this, I can feel the bumps a little bit more sitting taller.
Yeah.
It's not uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's still a nice ride, and I kind of like feeling that a little bit, not too much, but because then it reminds me I'm in a truck. It's beefy.
Yeah.
It's, you know, protected. It's a beast on the road. I kind of like that. Like, I don't want it to feel weak. Yeah.
I will say, a lot of people do complain about this. Is your seat high enough too, by the way? You can lift it up if you want, because I know your eyes are barely over that steering wheel. By the way, I've had a GMC and I have 2 Chevys now. I have never set up my seat memories on these trucks. I need to do that, and I need to have you set yours up too.
Yeah.
So what I was gonna say was, the hood on the GM trucks is very high. This truck does not have parking sensors. If you're gonna do this upgrade to your truck, you're gonna need a front camera, so you're gonna need a 360 camera, and you're definitely gonna want parking sensors. When I park this in our garage, I have to basically back in because I have the backup camera, because pulling into the garage, I have to jump out and check how much space I have, because her white car is in front, and I don't know how close I am because this truck is so tall. I mean, it's tall from the factory, but having the level on it is even worse. So now you really have to check. So that is a negative that I've noticed with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys can tell on the road, but the hood is a lot taller. But again, if you have the 360 camera, you can actually use this while you're parking or while you're driving. So like if you need to clear something, if you need to go around something, yeah, that makes things a little bit easier. Now, how does the steering feel, you would say?
It's nice.
Does it feel heavy?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this in this video, but that Ford yesterday, the steering wheel felt really tight. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It felt heavy, like when you're asking me to turn the tires.
Yeah.
It's like really hard to turn it.
So I actually rented a Ford truck. You guys are gonna see some of the footage probably within the next week or so. You might even see some sooner than that. But I rented a Ford truck for about a day. I towed with it, so you might want to subscribe because it was a high output power stroke. And my wife is saying that that truck had a lot stiffer steering. Cause you did drive that truck. I forgot about that.
It's a lot harder to turn it.
Yeah.
This is not like that. It feels fine. It doesn't feel loose and it doesn't feel too stiff.
Yeah. I felt like having the 37's, the steering felt a little bit more heavier. But it's not tighter. Now, I don't know if the steering is affected with the solid axles on the Fords versus the independent on these, but I mean, I noticed that the steering on the Ford was kind of tight too. I mean, it did have a level on it too, actually. Now that you bring it up, that truck had a level on it too, and it had 35 by 12 and a half. So I mean, Ford's probably having that solid front axle, it might feel a little stiffer. I would say a little bit harder to turn versus something like this.
I do have to mash the brakes.
Yeah, see?
I feel like in this. And I try to start it early because it does feel like a lot to stop, especially when we're going like 55, 60 on these roads. And then we come to a light, I try to stop as far back as I can, or start as far back as I can. Because I have to mash it. Yeah, and at 0, it does feel a little sluggish off the line. But once it gets going, I don't think you would ever be able to tell the difference. But you are right though, the brakes, that's the one thing I will say, that's the biggest negative to these 37's, is it is a little bit more effort to stop this truck. So towing, I can't wait to see how that affects it. Now you could ride around with the exhaust brake on and allow that to kind of help you, you know, with the stop. But sometimes with GM trucks, GM, if you're watching this, you said you fixed your exhaust brake. You kind of did. It works intermittent, and when it does work, I will say, their exhaust brake is pretty dang good. But it's intermittent. Hypothetically, if we went back on the road full time, could you drive this truck as your daily? Honest opinion, you had the Ram. I know you said the Ram was a little stiffer. With this truck having 37's, could you do it? I think I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I could.
We're gonna get my wife parking this beast too with these wide tires, because as you guys know, they do poke out just a little bit. I know a lot of people don't like the poke. I'm not a big fan of poke tires either. I like them to be flush with the wheel wells personally. But if you're gonna do this, that's another negative with this truck. And I'll probably talk about some of the negatives in a separate video, but that is definitely something I'm not a huge fan of. But you're gonna have to accept that simply because these tires are just so big. And if you're gonna run a spacer between those tires, it has to be at least 2 inches, because if it's any shorter, you have to cut your studs. And I was not gonna do that. So yeah, that's just something to consider if you are looking at this. She is thick. Oh, she is thick. Oh my goodness. She is thick. Someone said I should get a license plate that says thick, or she's thick, or something like that. So in the last video we did with your driving impressions, do you remember what you hit?
A tree.
Yeah, you hit a tree.
It was like a bush.
It was like a bush tree or something like that.
A tiny little bush.
But if you want to restart, this way you can get a little bit closer to the curb, and then you should be good.
Okay.
Cool? So that's the best you could do, actually. So yeah, having these wider tires, you're gonna have to get really close to the curb.
I had more room.
Yeah, you did, but you're fine. I mean, that's good enough. Anybody's gonna park beside you, so.
Okay.
I hope you guys liked the video. We're actually gonna go eat Chipotle, and we gotta head home because our RV rental is going back out again. I need to do a video on that. We have been like busy with that. Like, how many people have we had in like the last 2 months? At least 10 people, at least. Crazy. Later.